Welcome back to the Explainer. All right, let's jump straight into what might honestly be the most highly classified scientific and mechanical operation happening in your kitchen right now. Now, you might think I'm talking about rocket science or, microengineering, but we're actually talking about eating a simple bowl of spaghetti. Specifically, spaghetti al pomodoro. We're going to completely deconstruct this iconic dish today, not just as food, but as a surprisingly rigid system of chemistry and physics.
So you kind of have to ask yourself, are you committing a severe culinary violation every single time you eat pasta? Well, the surprising answer for a whole lot of people is an absolute yes. As we go through this explainer, we'll discover that most of us routinely violate some incredibly strict rules of Italian bon ton, which just means good manners, without even realizing it. You might think you're being sophisticated at dinner, but you could actually be breaking centuries-old mechanical etiquette.
Okay, here's our operational briefing for the Explainer today. First up, the Pomodoro matrix. Second, Protocol Alpha. Third, Protocol Beta. And finally, we'll tackle the spoon fallacy.
Right, moving into Section 1, the Pomodoro matrix. This is really the foundational Italian carbohydrate system.
First things first, we absolutely have to stop looking at this dish as just some casual throw-together weeknight meal. To really grasp it, you have to approach it as a highly disciplined, minimalist system, where literally every single variable matters. The Pomodoro matrix is defined strictly by just 4 elements: San Marzano tomatoes, garlic, olive oil, and that magic starchy pasta water. Authentic Pomodoro relies completely on the high quality of these exact components. You purposefully leave out heavy meat lipids or excessive spices. Why? Well, so the bright, natural acidity of those tomatoes completely dominates the palate. It's culinary restraint at its absolute finest.
All right, Section 2, Protocol Alpha, the chemistry. This is all about executing the perfect sauce.
So now we are officially stepping into the kitchen. And we aren't just cooking here. We are strictly governing the thermodynamic phases of our ingredients to create a flawless emulsion. There are 3 mandatory phases required to successfully construct this fundamental matrix. And look, if you fail at phase 1, phase 3 just collapses. It's a total chain reaction. The aromatic base, the acidic reduction, and finally, the starch emulsion. Let's break these down.
Phase 1 is the aromatic base. You're going to begin by warming exactly 1/4 cup of extra virgin olive oil in a wide 12-inch skillet over medium-low heat. You drop in 1 crushed, peeled garlic clove and let it sizzle for precisely 2 minutes. So that 2-minute mark is absolutely crucial. You're carefully infusing the lipids, the oil, with allicin, which is the primary aromatic compound in garlic, without burning it and turning the whole thing bitter.
Moving on to the acidic reduction. The magic number here is 28. You must introduce exactly 28 ounces, or roughly 800 grams, of whole, peeled San Marzano tomatoes. And here's where the real manual labor comes in. You actually have to crush them manually with the wooden spoon right there in the pan. No blenders, no food processors, none of that. You want that organic, rustic texture that you really only get from manual crushing.
After you've seasoned it with kosher salt and let it simmer uncovered for about 35 to 40 minutes, you don't just, guess when it's done. You're looking for 3 exact chemical reactions. The sauce reaches optimality when the ambient water evaporates, the red of the tomatoes darkens significantly, and the olive oil begins to separate and pool just slightly on the surface. That is your visual cue that the chemistry is perfectly balanced.
Now listen up, because this is where a lot of home cooks make a fatal error. For the final phase, never ever use a colander to drain your pasta. You must use tongs to transfer those al dente noodles directly from the boiling water right into the simmering sauce. Why? Because a colander literally washes down the drain the liquid gold we desperately need for this final step.
And bypassing the colander perfectly sets up that final step, the starch emulsion. By dragging those noodles directly over, they bring a nice splash of the highly starchy cooking water with them. When that starchy water hits the simmering oil and tomato juices, it triggers this violent physical emulsion. It's essentially a forced marriage of oil and water, permanently binding the flavor matrix directly to the surface of your spaghetti.
Okay, Section 3, Protocol Beta, Mechanical Etiquette. These are the strict rules of the dining table. Because, look, having a perfectly constructed Pomodoro matrix honestly means nothing if you consume it like an amateur. The execution of this protocol requires 4 highly specific, fine motor steps: utensil isolation, strand isolation, the cocoon wind, and finally, the payload delivery.
First up, utensil isolation. Fork goes in your dominant hand. Nothing else. Then, strand isolation. You must ground the tines of your fork on an empty, flat sector on the outer perimeter of your plate. Gently hook a maximum of 2 to 3 individual strands of spaghetti. Seriously, do not grab a massive pile. Keep the fork firmly anchored at a 45-degree angle. This angle is your mechanical leverage.
Next is what's known as the cocoon wind. While maintaining that 45-degree anchor, you just rotate the fork slowly. You're engineering a tight, tidy bundle, what the Italians consider a perfect cocoon. Once wound, you lift the entire payload. The golden rule here, you must consume that entire cocoon in one single complete bite.
And I literally cannot emphasize this enough. Do not bite those strands in half so they fall back onto your plate, and whatever you do, do not hoover or slurp the pasta up into your mouth. These are absolute, unforgivable violations of the etiquette. It completely ruins the aesthetic of the dish, and it disrupts the dining experience for everyone around you. It is a total failure of the mechanical protocol.
Which brings us to Section 4, the Red Team Report. It's time to debunk the spoon fallacy.
Let's talk about what is probably the most pervasive and dangerous dining myth in Western households today. You know the one. The Western myth dictates that using a spoon in your non-dominant hand as a surface to twirl against is somehow the height of culinary sophistication. But the Italian reality is starkly different. That spoon is an absolute abomination. This false belief really stems from mid-20th century immigrant adaptations, where diners simply struggled with long pasta and just needed a bit of help. Somehow, that crutch got rebranded over time as fancy. I promise you it is not. In modern Italy, it is pure sacrilege.
I mean, according to strict Italian bon ton, using a spoon to eat long pasta is viewed as, and I quote, a crutch strictly reserved for young children who lack fine motor skills. Ouch. That is a pretty definitive stance, right? In reality, you absolutely must banish both the spoon and the knife from your pasta protocol. Spoons are strictly reserved for soups and broths. If you're using a spoon on spaghetti, you are essentially broadcasting to the chef that you have the dexterity of a toddler.
So as we wrap up this explainer, I'll leave you with this final thought. The next time you sit down with a beautifully crafted, perfectly emulsified matrix of Pomodoro, how are you going to execute your mechanical twirl? Will you reach for that forbidden spoon, or are your fine motor skills finally ready to master the perfect cocoon? The chemistry is completely in your hands, but the etiquette, well, that's entirely up to you. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive into the science and mechanics of spaghetti. Keep learning, keep practicing, and I will see you in the next explainer.